Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. This week we focus on a word, a concept that is so often front and center in Indian country. The word? Sovereignty, as in tribal sovereignty. Vice President Kamala Harris thrust it into the presidential campaign at her first rally as the Democratic standard bearer.
And as president, I will tell you, I will always honor tribal sovereignty and respect tribal self-determination.
Her opponent, Donald Trump,
America great again.
in his previous campaign, echoed those thoughts, saying he, quote, is committed to respecting tribal sovereignty. The thoughts are welcome in Indigenous communities, though longtime political observer Dick Trudell cautions presidential candidates often promise to back sovereignty and then fall short in their actions. So what is meant by this broad term, sovereignty? Turns out, it can mean many things. To frontline activists like Onondaga citizen Hickory Edwards, it means looking out for the health of the planet's water.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I start becoming a water protector, is coming on these waters and seeing directly firsthand the sickness on these waters. We have all these pollutants that come in where some places where we can't swim.
And it means reestablishing a presence on the continent's waterways.
The original waterways were the original highways of America. And so what this journey is doing is reaffirming our territorial jurisdiction over our water.
To others, food sovereignty is sovereignty.
Okay. So over here, we do have our, Aboriginal corn, our Metacom corn. And then on this side is some sweet corn that...
I think food is the most important key to all of this, because food is the central point that we all have to have every single day. It's something that connects us as humans around the world. Yeah, and part of the steps of food sovereignty is just having local control and non-governmental control over food systems.
And to many, it means land back. The one-word encapsulation of the fight to restore original ownership and stewardship to native land. And sometimes that means direct action.
This is our stolen part of the lake and stolen pieces of our land here.
Like McGeezy Spears, who breaks Minnesota law every year by fishing on Red Lake before the season opens.
We've proven our points here to the Minnesota DNR and the Beltrami County Sheriff's Department that we're in charge of this lake here by proving it.
And sometimes that means art, like Nicholas Galanin's installation in New York City that draws attention to the land.
I often think of the chosen histories that are represented in place opposed to things that are, purposefully ignored and I feel like this work offers a lot of entrance for various perspectives in a space like this, whether it's people that are navigating colonial borders, whether it's colonial borders that cross Indigenous territories in space, and I feel like this touches on a lot of that.
Sometimes that means long-term efforts to get Congress to act. ICT's Stuart Huntington followed one such story that ended this summer with a major victory.
Yesterday was probably the most historic day on Leech Lake Reservation since the reservation was established. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than that for us.
Tribal, state, and federal officials gathered on the Leech Lake Reservation to celebrate the partial righting of a 20th century wrong.
Thank you for joining us in celebrating this return of 11,700 acres of land that was illegally taken from Leech Lake. Yes.
In the 1940s and 50s, a succession of Bureau of Indian Affairs leaders illegally transferred thousands of acres of tribal lands into the Chippewa National Forest without telling the native owners.
A lot of times they didn't even know that the land was transferred out from underneath them until they came back years later and they would find a locked Forest Service gate on the road into their land and be like, what's going on here? I'm trying to go out to my family's hunting land, trying to go.
For 70 plus years, Leech Lakers worked to get the land back. The work culminated in the 2020 Leech Lake Band Ojibwe Reservation Restoration Act, signed into law by President Trump. The law reads, the BIA incorrectly interpreted an order of the Secretary of the Interior to mean it could sell land without consent of the Indian owners.
There's scant evidence, however, that they misinterpreted anything, as it was a particularly rapacious era at the BIA where the main focus was the termination of Indian nations. One of the directors during this time was Dylan Meyer, who previously oversaw the mass incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II.
This land that I'm walking here right now is land that was flat out stolen in the mid-20th century, just because federal officials and others thought they could.
It took the Forest Service a few years to survey the land, and today, delineated in multiple parcels throughout the reservation, it is back in Leech Lake hands. I asked Elder Michael Smith, Sr., to tell me what the return means.
Yesterday was a beautiful day for what happened. It was something that meant a lot to the Shinabe people. Because in the past, they come and took that land. And they used many tactics to get it at the cheapest expense they can get it.
Minnesota Senator Tina Smith was on hand to mark the transfer and look ahead.
Today we are celebrating the restoration of land illegally taken from the Leech Lake Band. So as I'm sure you know, during this lengthy process, surveyors discovered another approximately 4,000 acres that had been taken and had not been included in the original bill. And so I want you all to know that we have a new bill to restore those about 4,000 acres, and I will not rest until that piece of the work is done.
And prophecies fulfilled.
Many years ago, an elder, he said, "Ego bombing again, Nagach, Kajamini Gomin, the Kimanan." Which meant, don't worry about it. Because further on down the road, they're going to give us back our land. Little chunks at a time. It's not going to
The
be
band plans to use some of the land from this year's transfer for much needed housing.
And also leaving some of it as like a natural forest. We would like to bring some of our animals that have gone away because their habitat has been destroyed from logging and stuff.
And finally, I asked Elder Smith if he had a message for future generations.
Oh, wait. Well, that's yo, guys, Gagi get to on yo. Gain each gay watch na big. Na good job, it's too na why yo. Cause way back to be Jinago. Yo, Paneja. The Bama say what yo, the Wabanta na wa, Gego, Gashana should do na wa, Jimaji Kitty what yo, we seen a win. Maskaki. And that's yo, Nagats, that's yo, Panego, Jini, we queen down na wa yo, cause way back Bijinago, we go to wa go, Manadug. No kamasnani na sumasanani ka we do car to audio gin gasui waki jinago mi gwech tashin in yo bizinta yegi mi no yo oh mi gwech. You want it in English now?
No, that's good. Those that understand will understand.
Yeah, they'll understand.
On the Leech Lake Reservation, Stuart Huntington, ICT.
Tribal sovereignty can also take hold in business. I recently visited the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in California to check in on that nation's groundbreaking effort to control electrical transmission lines crossing the territory. The future of clean energy runs through indigenous lands, including here on the Morongo Indian Nation. This is a story about tribal sovereignty, the energy transition, and innovation. Think about a light switch. We flip the switch and the light comes on. That's the way it's worked for decades. The energy grid, the system we have built, connects your house, an office, even a factory. But the green energy revolution is changing all of that. Now we need a lot more electricity to power everything from cars to banks of computers. We need more.
The demand for energy, for electricity in particular, has just skyrocketed. Data centers.
Sudine Kelly is a former federal energy regulatory commissioner. She's watched communities trying to figure out how to add capacity to the electric grid.
It's a challenge. Nobody wants a transmission line in their backyard or even in their view shed or on their ranch or in the national forest.
A generation ago, electric grids on tribal lands were handled largely by the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the electric utilities. But the recognition of tribal sovereignty was a game changer. Enter the Morongo Band of Mission Indians and Southern California Edison.
Utilities have their mindset is they'll just come in and take your lands through eminent domain, and there's not much you can do about it. And I imagine that's what they can do anywhere else except for when it comes to a sovereign. And they have to get approval from us.
A few years ago, Edison wanted to upgrade its lines through the Morongo Nation under right-of-way pacts negotiated in the 1950s.
Those were coming due, and we knew this. And Edison was going to come back and want to renegotiate.
So the utility had to work with the tribe.
Edison needed to upgrade that line to bring more renewable from Arizona into California, where there's great demand for it. And that upgrade would require a wider right-of-way.
So we held out, and they eventually had to come around and negotiate with us.
And so Edison set about discussing with the tribe, is there a way that we can do this? That's a win-win.
Someone on the Morongo tribe's team suggested that the tribe own the line, something that routinely happens with community-owned utilities.
And that's how we got this unique and first of its kind agreement that recognizes the tribe's significant contribution of its land.
This was a very difficult project to get together. The tribe had to build a whole team. We didn't have any of these people. We just had an idea. We had to get lawyers. We had to get lawyers in the field transmission line.
Ownership changed the nature of the deal. A $400 million package that expanded the transmission lines, bringing clean energy to Southern California.
We feel it's a good model for tribes all across the country to look at and adapt and see if they can use any part of it. I think it would be good for other tribes. I know it would be. It was very good for us.
It's a historic partnership for the company, a first of its kind joint venture between a tribal-owned transmission company and SCE. And the project has been a really important addition to bringing clean energy to Southern California. And it is just a really important part of the clean energy future. So we're really grateful to the tribe for the partnership. The clean energy future is just essential in every possible way. We know that culturally, the tribes have embodied sustainability, and that concept has, thank goodness, spread to other aspects of society and led to improved planning, improved resource use, and improved infrastructure.
With this, the first time this was ever done, where we became partners with Edison in the transmission lines that went across the reservation. And we did all of this with the tribe investing, and the tribe being a partner with the utility, which I don't know has ever been done, at no increase to the ratepayers.
One of our goals was to produce a cleaner product produced by Southern California Edison. That was something that we addressed in this arrangement.
The new transmission lines do more than move energy across the desert. The process also is about what's possible when tribes, the state, and energy companies work together.
I just want to share this with the other tribes because it is possible to sit down and negotiate these types of deals. They're not easy. It takes a real commitment, on the both parties. But if you work at it, it's extremely possible.
As the country wrestles with a clean energy future and an aging infrastructure, so many of the solutions come back here to Indian country. And of course, tribal sovereignty is also fought for in the courts. 2 days before I visited Morongo, the tribe celebrated the anniversary of a major Supreme Court victory in Brackeen versus Holland.
As we honor the importance of ICWA and the U.S. Supreme Court decision, we should always also pause to honor the victims, the survivors, and the descendants of the boarding schools.
The case upheld the Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA, the law designed to respect family, culture, and tribal ties in child welfare cases. The ruling reaffirmed Native people's sovereignty of its most precious asset, our children.
The historic decision protected our children and protected our tribal sovereignty. You know, it ensured that our children, that the tribe would always have a voice in their future. And it ensured that children could always be tied to their family, to their culture, to their heritage, and to the reservation community.
No one expected the decision to be as strong as it was. A huge victory for Indian country. And I think we have to take that victory and not take it for granted. So one thing, when we think about what's next, is to celebrate that win. I think in a way it's an act of resistance or an act of resilience to celebrate that win. And I hope that every June 15th, people across this country have an opportunity to remember that win, to remind everybody that tribes are not going to go away, that Indian children will continue to be protected. We know that the folks who want to bring down the Indian Child Welfare Act have their eyes on a much broader agenda, without question. I'm somewhat skeptical that they actually care that much about Indian children. I think they care much more about bringing down the concepts of tribal sovereignty to unleash the resources that tribes currently hold and protect.
Of course, the battles over sovereignty are not over. It is so important because it represents a marker about our place in the world and our future. But the fight is just as important to the broader community. Let's let Professor Donald Pixico of Arizona State University and Mashpee Wampanoag Chairman Brian Whedon have the last words.
For some Native groups, some Native nations, they actually take sovereignty to mean an obligation or responsibility, so that it's to recognize the sovereignty of other people, to respect other people. And not just that, but for plants and animals, everything that has a spirit, mountains, trees, rivers, and so forth.
To us, it's more about preserving and protecting it, for the future generations and all of our relations. When we talk about all of our relations, it's not just the living beings, but it's the other beings that you don't see, and advocating for the whales and the birds and so on and so forth. It's not just our responsibility to take care of each other, but to take care of Mother Earth. And right now, with everything going on in the world, I think it's safe to say that, nobody's really taking care of Mother Earth like she should be taken care of, or else we wouldn't have global warming and all these other issues that we have today.